All right, thank you guys all for coming and your participation. We're going to go ahead and move on with our agenda to Board of Education committees. I'm not sure that we've had any so far this year, but just making sure I didn't miss. Okay.
I just going to say we did have a city council meeting.
We did have a city council meeting.
I think it's probably going to be most appropriate to have the discussion around the positivity of that when we get to some of John's comments later. So we'll hold tight on that. I just want to make sure that the fellow board members knew that.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. All right, our student representative update.
Hello, representatives. My name is Elise Janikian, and I am the representative of Emerald Campus. It's an honor to be speaking with you all today, and I'm very excited to assume this role as the senior representative. So what's been happening so far is school's begun, and the teachers and students are hard at work. Last week, the board reps spoke at all of the home schools, engaging with the class and the students, and so each class meeting we promoted our positions as representatives, and we also are putting out a new DCS feedback form from the Board of Representatives to engage student input, which we'll hopefully present to you soon once we finish analyzing the data. In addition, today is National Glitter Day, and the DJHS Glitter Club, which is a chapter of the nonprofit organization Glitter Girls Guild, they have chalked the sidewalks leading up to Jerome High School with positive messages to brighten students' day. They're very, very good. They're really cute. So thank you all so much, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A question, how long the Glitter Girls Guild, is this a first year in all the high schools?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's what I was assuming. That's very exciting. I'm glad to hear you guys are doing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Journey 2030.
Okay, I'm going to start us off today with a quick summary of Journey 2030, what it is, and then I will turn it over to the team to share about their individual departments. So just as a quick review, Journey 2030 is a strategic plan that we put in place after Dublin had many years of not having a strategic plan. We launched it at the end of 2023 after several months of work, really getting feedback from our community, our staff, our students, and our administrators. And we put together Journey 2030 strategic plan with the intent of having annual goals. So if you recall, last year at about this time, we presented goals, and then in June of 2024, we gave you a recap on those goals. So here we are again, and we're going to share our annual goals going forward. Just as a note, as we said in the spring, there were some goals that we thought, okay, this isn't quite the right direction where we want to go. And we did, that's exactly why we're having annual goals. You change, you grow, you learn something, you adjust to the needs of the students. And so you will find in a couple of areas, Mr. Boney's is an example, communications is another, where you'll see we changed course a little bit from last year's, and that was very intentional. So we're going to start off with Mrs. Marple, who's going to talk to us about academic goals. She will pass it on to Mr. Andres, then Mr. Boney, back to me, Mr. Stark, and then Dr. Marshausen will bring us home.
Thank you, Dr. Schwanke. Here you can see our first academic goal, which is based around the early literacy of our students in Dublin City Schools. So we continue to work towards our 2030 goal, which ultimately is having our students be proficient readers. And in district, we have done a great amount of work around teacher learning, professional development, alignment of assessments, and instruction. Our district K-3 reading map data in the spring indicated some small decreases this past spring, but still remains well above the national average. So our team continues to monitor this and other data points, and we're very encouraged by the data we are seeing relating to the foundational reading skills as measured by our new assessment that we started last year, M-Class Dibbles 8. So we know that this assessment that we brought on board more closely aligns with the instructional goals of our early readers. So we're leaning heavily on it. As our teachers and our interventionists become proficient at looking at this data and adjusting their instruction around that data, we really do believe that this will transfer to greater literacy growth over time. Therefore, this year you're going to see that our early literacy focus in grades K through 2 will focus on that M-Class DIBELS 8 data. We're in the process right now with our young learners of collecting our baseline data and learning more about the readers in our classrooms. Our team reflected on last year's journey with DIBELS 8 data in order to write this year's goal that you can see here. And our goal is that by next spring, the number of students scoring at or above grade level in their composite score with DIBELS 8, that number of students would increase by 25%. When an increase of 25% maxes out that grade level, our goal in that building would be that all of the students not yet at or above proficient would become proficient. And so as we've talked about, our buildings are very unique representations of our district as a whole, and so we're really digging in with our principals and looking at their building data and their students to really set goals for students. In doing that, there's some district level action steps I want to bring to your attention. We are now doing the full DIBELS measure for our kindergartners 3 times a year. Last year, you might recall, we did not do the full measure 3 times a year. Building and district teams are writing goals around these. They're balancing both achievement and growth data as they're looking at their learners, really taking into consideration our special populations of learners that might need some extra attention. And our teachers and interventionists are working daily and regularly in their team meetings to align instruction and intervention to increase our growth. So that professional development and that embedded PD that we have with our teachers and our interventionists is really going to be a focus this year to maximize learning against all of our students and subgroups. We're going to shift then to the pathways goal. And you can see here that, as you may recall, we had established a list of success measures for our graduates based on pathway learning. And that list remains the same. You can see that the class of 2024 had 71.7% of students graduating with at least 2 of these success measures. And so as we go through this school year, we're hoping to raise that by about 5% up to 77%. A couple of the things happening in the buildings is last year, you might recall, we worked on 8th grade plans so that they could do some more longitudinal planning. Our 9th grade teams are going to think about how to kind of carry that work up into the high school. We are working to more clearly articulate content connections to our pathway work. This would include credentials and career clusters. We are continuing to partner with our high school department chairs for advisement. We are implementing new electives at 7th grade this year related to this goal. We are streamlining our Emerald Campus internship and capstone program and working to embed credentials and the Ohio Means Job Seal into some of the curriculum as outlined in our academic pathways and programs. And of course, we're continuing to think about Rise Up when we think about those credentials as well. Mr. Andres?
Thanks, Lori. So as Dr. Schwanke said, some annual goals need revisions and some don't. Both of our student experience goals will remain the same this year. We gained momentum last year, but we think we need another year to see the growth that we really want. So first, under the well-rounded goal, it's important to remember that graduating high school is complicated. So you have to earn your credits, you have to meet competency on end-of-course exams, and you have to earn 2 graduation seals. And so again, we want 95% of our students, our graduates, to earn at least 1 local seal. So we're going to continue our focus on awareness and promoting opportunities for kids in engagement, in community service, and in the arts. Specifically, we noticed very few students earned the community service seal, and we know we've got kids that are doing a lot of community service, so that leads into another action step, which is we have to refine our tracking system to catch not only what kids do with us during the school day and school-related activities, but also in the many, many activities that they participate in life outside of Dublin City Schools. Our second goal, physical and mental wellness, is all about increasing the number of students that report having supportive relationships with a friend, a family member, or an adult from school. So this year, we'll provide professional learning with our staff, highlighting the link between supportive relationships and student resilience. So resilience, it's a term people like to throw around, but basically adapting to stressful situations and bouncing back from failure or defeat. And we all, as teachers and adults, we've experienced these setbacks, but sharing in an appropriate way specific setbacks that we've had with kids is a great way to build that bond and that relationship between teachers and students. We'll also provide our administrators professional learning around best practices using the data that we have to collect this information from our students to ensure that we're using it the right way and capitalizing on all the great things that data can offer and the questions that come with it. And finally, we're going to use those OSU mental health interns that we just discussed a little bit ago to build more relationships with our kids and our families. We'll refine and enhance the Hope Squads that we now have up and running at all of our high schools and our middle schools. And now I will pass to Mr. Boney for staff development.
All right. Good evening. So the HR area was one area that we did some revision around. So initially, partnerships and networking, we developed a goal that was really focused on recruitment. And so last year, our school year goal said that by spring of 2024 that we would increase the number of high-quality, ethnically diverse certified staff recruited and interviewed by 5%. That is not a goal that we met. Some of the things that we realized last year as the year wore on were things that with responsible staffing that we just took a different, shift. And so this is probably the smallest class of certified staff that we've had since I've been here. And so we felt like this was an area we needed to think about a little bit more. There was a piece of that goal, though, around actions that we kept, though, and that was around this piece of designing a long-term plan to create an internal staff candidate pipeline, because we do believe that it's important to retain our staff. And we also know it's important to develop staff. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So the revised goal that we have is around enhancing staff development. So instead of recruitment, this is around development and then retention by fostering and creating a supportive and growth-oriented work environment with the hopes of ultimately reducing turnover by 15% and increasing staff satisfaction and engagement. So I want to just share something here in terms of some stats. So over the last 4 years, so both our Dublin Education Association, led by Mrs. O'Connor, and then our Dublin Support Association, led by Mrs. Williams, have tuition benefit dollars. In our Support Association, we've only utilized 40% of the available tuition benefit dollars. Those dollars can be used to do things like find career pathways. Turnover rates are pretty low for teachers in Dublin City Schools. Our turnover rates are under 5%. If you look at some of the averages, whether it's statewide or nationally, turnover rates for teachers are usually much higher than that. So quite honestly, we're in pretty good shape with our certified staff. But overall, we've seen an increase in staff exiting the district, especially in those non-instructional roles. So for example, our paraprofessionals, we have over 200 of them in our district. Our turnover rate for paraprofessionals is currently about 14.5%. That's a pretty high number. So our school year goal in that is by the end of the 24-25 school year, Dublin City Schools will enhance staff development, those recruitment and retention efforts by implementing targeted professional development opportunities and support programs with the aim of reducing that turnover rate by 5% and ultimately improving overall staff satisfaction. We do some things right now in the district. Some of them are unique. We offer some pipeline programs like our administrative intern program. We have the social work intern program that we talked about earlier. We have Dublin Teaching Academy. And we also know through talking with Mr. Andres that we have an opportunity to find some of those paraprofessionals that are really talented and really good at their jobs, and we can help them because a lot of times those individuals, they want to move on to become special ed teachers, or they want to move on and work in related services areas. We believe that we can find some of those folks to do that and help them with developing plans. So we want to continue to do that. We want to develop and design long-term plans to create and build pipelines. The last part of this is that we want to develop and refine retention strategies. We do exit interviews with staff, but we want to make them a little bit more targeted, get more data so we have a better understanding of why is it that staff leave. We have turnover rates that vary from classification to different positions. We want to use that in order to reduce turnover and then keep the staff that we work hard to bring into the district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Schwanke.
Okay. So here's another goal that was revised, the goal about communications. Now, if you recall, we initially had a goal where we really wanted to get more people into Emerald Campus for some community events. What we found, honestly, if I can be frank, is parents love to go to their children's school for events. They go to them, they go a lot. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events across our campus. Speaking for myself, as a Sells Middle School parent last year, I didn't necessarily want another evening where I came to central office. So we adjusted. And what we're going to work on is our communications infrastructure. We have found that in the past, our website, like many districts, we looked for some bells and whistles for it to be splashy. What we want it to be is an information hub. We want it to be accurate, we want it to be updated and easy to navigate. That was a gigantic project that Cassie and her team took on this year. But we also want to build capacity with our principals, with our teachers, and even with our students as digital communicators. We want to focus on concise, impactful messaging. We want to train our staff on effective communication practices. We want to drive people to the website to find accurate information so they don't go find it themselves or worse, create it. We want to make sure that all of our communication is accessible to our English language families or to anyone with a disability or anything that is a barrier to receiving information. And so again, our goal is to significantly strengthen the district's communication framework. Shout out to Cassie and her team for not only leading this, but for understanding they're a team of 3. They need to train the rest of us to do this work alongside them. So that goal will then bring us to master facility planning with Mr. Stark.
Mine's pretty complicated here, so I want you to hold with me. Our goal is to build. We're going to build during the day. We're going to build during the night, in the heat and the cold, in the sun and the rain. We have a lot to build. The list is there, and that's only a partial list. 25 will probably be the busiest year we've ever had. We are going to require the flexibility of our own staff in our community, because you know when you make improvements, they do cause inconveniences. We'll be shutting down areas for refurbishing tracks. We'll be shutting down parking lots. We'll be shutting down schools that will not be able to rent or have summer school because we're going to be putting fire alarms, and we have all types of stuff going on. So pardon our dust and pardon what we do. So we're hoping everyone gives us some flexibility, focus on the end picture, and we'll be real busy. I wanted to have the sound effect of like hammers going off in the background, but I'm not sure if Cassie was able to pull that off. If there's any questions.
All right, well, here we go. Master facility planning. We sent a letter today to our focus groups and thanked them for their input during the focus group process. What became clear during the focus group process is we have 2 issues, and this is going to require a 2-prong approach. As we heard from our partners at Planning Next at the previous board meeting, our taxpayers have taxpayer fatigue. It was the #1 issue in our focus groups. And many of the conversations were, in the short term, you've got to deal with the growth that's coming and not come back and ask us for additional money. So, short term, we are in the field with an RFQ for architectural services. It will be posted on Wednesday for an architect to put an addition on Dublin-Scioto High School. The addition on Dublin-Scioto High School will be approximately 60,000 square feet in size and match the addition that was recently put on Dublin-Jerome High School. This is a short-term solution that will allow us to shift 500 to 600 students to Scioto High School and help deal with our increasing high school enrollment over the next several years. This will not require additional levy dollars from our community. This was part of the levy and the authority to issue debt that was approved by the voters in 2023. This will also help us balance our enrollment between our 3 high schools. When at capacity, Scioto High School will be approximately 2,000 students, Kaufman at 2,000 students, and Jerome at 2,400 students. The community has demonstrated support for an addition on Scioto with both the 2018 and 2023 ballot issues and the 2024 focus group issues. We also continue to see imbalance as Jerome continues to grow and Scioto's enrollment remains steady around 1,500 students. This leads us to then the future option. We get asked, is this the long-term solution? No. We know that we are going, let me rephrase that. Our enrollment projections indicate by moderate projection that we'll have 2,000 new high school students by 2034. This gets us to where we're still going to need room for about 1,500 additional students by 2034. But this is the short-term solution. The City of Dublin and Mr. Valentine and Mrs. Gillis were with us in a meeting with city officials on Thursday. We have committed to an ongoing conversation between the City of Dublin, the schools, and Cardinal Health. The Cardinal Health building is something that is going to require collaboration and ongoing conversations with our partners at the city and our largest employer and business in Dublin and one of the largest companies in the state of Ohio. There is a mutual commitment between the three of us to have these conversations in search of a long-term solution. We also own the land on Industrial Parkway in Mitchell DeWitt by the roundabout that should open on Wednesday. That land is also an option. So short-term, addition on Scioto, balance. Long-term, continue the conversations, continue the partnerships, because this all needs to be part of an ongoing conversation that will take place within Dublin and within our community. We also, their enrollment projections. So things could go even higher. Things could slow down. This is the responsible thing for us to do now without asking for additional revenue. The hard part, making the decision and having Mr. Stark build the building, is the easy part. The minute the letter went out at 11:53 a.m. this morning, at 12:06 we got our first email asking about high school redistricting. Facebook and our social media sites have already started commenting that we know what's going to happen with high school redistricting. This is going to require difficult conversations and a process to determine how we increase and who moves from where to put 500 more students at Scioto High School. The current boundaries haven't changed since 2006. So when people talk about history, there isn't a student in our schools who was alive with anything but the current high school boundaries. So the history's the history, but we're going to work to make sure that we balance this in a way that will last us until we have to do the next redistricting or building process. So our timeline is as such. We are going to, and I think I got the right slide coming up next. Here we go. Tomorrow night, we have our first elementary and middle school redistricting webinar. The link is posted, and folks can go to the link and be live tomorrow.
Yes, the link was in the Inside DCS newsletter, and it is on the website now. A lot of people did want it ahead of time. It goes nowhere. It's a Zoom link, so it will only go somewhere tomorrow night.
So tomorrow, we start the middle school and elementary school process. Not talking high schools yet. In October, I believe it's the 19th, is that correct?
17th?
17th?
Correct.
In October, on the 7th.
Oh, sorry. A lot of dates flying around.
Okay, October 21st. Cropper GIS will have the maps for proposed elementary and middle school redistricting for a gallery walk at Jerome High School, and they will have a public meeting to take comments on the maps that are presented. As we've said multiple times, these aren't finalized. They're still working on it, and the maps as presented will give opportunity for input. In December, we will officially announce the new elementary and middle school district boundaries for the 25-26 school year. Once that's done, and after the holidays, we're going to start again with the high school. So in January of 25, we will begin a very similar process where we will form a high school internal planning team, which will share with Cropper GIS some of the non-negotiables in terms of parameters for redistricting. We want to keep neighborhoods together. We don't want students from middle schools going to more than 2 high schools. We'll put those parameters in place. In the spring of 25, we will have a public webinar. In late summer 2025, we will have maps for people to review. And by the fall of next year, we will announce the new high school boundaries that will take effect in the fall of 2026. Here's our goal, and I think this is important for everyone to hear. Ultimately, we want to allow students the opportunity, if they choose, to finish at the high school they start in. So if a student is a freshman, sophomore, or junior in 25-26 at one of our high schools, they will have the option to finish there if their neighborhood gets redistricted someplace else. We want to make that as an option. It will be one of those one-time, make your choice. You have to provide transportation, but we will have that as an option for those families. And then in the fall of 26, we start with new high school boundaries. I also will reiterate, I'm going to ask policy committee starting next year to say we're just not doing intra-district open enrollment. Because as we balance high schools, right now the only high school with space is Scioto. We're going to eliminate that. They're all going to be full. So, and right now the intra-district open enrollment is it's becoming a significant headache and consumer of time. So we're going to bring that to policy committee. So here's the path looking forward. Our communication plan, the work from our focus groups was essential. We sent them an email today thanking them for their efforts and summarizing the focus group work. We also sent that email to our key communicators. We're talking about this tonight at a public board meeting. Tomorrow morning, there will be a board recap sent to the staff. And tomorrow evening, there will be a board recap sent to all of our families and be posted on the website. On the 28th, in our blog, this plan will also be posted. There's a lot of information and misinformation, even since something was sent at 12:53 today. We're going to continue to point people back to our website. We're going to continue to say that although we're getting the architect and we're getting ready because we have to act quickly to get an addition on Scioto ready for the fall of 26, we're not starting the high school redistricting plan until January. We're going to get elementary and middle done, and then high school will follow. When we talk about redistricting, and I'm going to use E plus R equals O here for a moment. You're above the line or you're below the line. And a lot of the time, anyone's first response is emotional and impulse. And that's what we're getting a lot of now. We're getting a lot of impulsive and emotional responses, a lot of personal responses. We use Cropper GIS as our consultant in redistricting because they aren't emotional and impulsive. They are intentional and on purpose. And when we're intentional and on purpose, we make better decisions. And just going through this process with elementary and the conversations we have and how they put houses into blocks and groups and look at what the birth rate's going to be and what we anticipate in the future. The quality of education in the Dublin City Schools is consistent from building to building. We're trying to take the emotion out of this process. We're going to have people say, how can you use Cropper? They don't know Dublin. Yes, but they know numbers. And it's about balancing numbers and keeping neighborhoods together as we do this work. It's going to be a rough, Dr. Schwanke and I talked today, it's 2 years until we open the redistricted high schools. It's going to be a up and down process. I believe using Cropper is going to help us stay in that above the line, intentional and purposeful process as we do this. All right, before I move on to my report, that brings us to a conclusion of Journey 2030. These are our 4 goal areas. These are the areas that we put a lot of time and effort in, and as we put this together. Are there any questions from the members of the board?
Not a question, but just a public point of clarification, having gone through this previously. And I think it's important to note that while we, obviously all 5 of us want feedback as board members, the decision ultimately with redistricting is specifically given to the superintendent through Ohio Revised Code. And that's not to mean go flood his email inbox, but it is something where folks do expect, and we've got a relatively new board who has not been through this before. I mean, like, folks will expect, and they probably are already connecting with all of you, that we have some vote in this process, or that there will be a vote. And I would encourage us, as we continue to put forth this information, to also remind folks of the way, as much as we're putting the timeline and the process up, I think it's important that we let them know that as well, because last time around we ran into somewhat of a false expectation that there was ultimately going to be a vote, and that's not the case. Like, when a decision is made, and we will move forward as a district and as a community.
Thanks, Mr. Valentine.
Well, and to that point, if I may, there's a communication strategy in place. Cropper will handle all communications, and we are training our principals and our teachers and all of us. If we get emails with questions or concerns or challenges, they're going to go to Cropper. Cropper has assured us they're going to read every single feedback piece. And so on their website, which will launch tomorrow night, there's a special website that Cropper will manage, and there's a Google form on there that will allow anyone to share their concerns. So if I get an email, if Dr. Marshausen gets an email, if Mrs. Rigby gets an email, we're going to ask that you have them go to that website and put their concerns there. What we're concerned about is we don't want anyone to email all of you and all of us hoping for a different answer. We want to make sure that all the feedback is absorbed, is considered, and then will be part of the final decision. Thank you for letting me put that.
I have just a comment. I just want to say thank you for putting all this together. It was a lot of work for everyone. And it's even more work to actually meet these goals. So I appreciate that as well. But I did just want to highlight the changes to communications. When I read that, I was like, this is great. This is awesome. Thank you, because there is so much going on that the communication, having a written strategic plan and really just focusing on good communication is going to be so important as we go through all of this. So thank you.
I also want to thank everyone for putting in the hard work, creating these goals. But I do have a question for Mrs. Marple, so I know I'm going all the way back to the beginning. So the data with the M-Class Dibbles 8, and then you're going to do strategic professional development based on that, and you also talked about subgroups within that as well. Do you have outside people coming in for this professional development? I know we have internal professional development, but are they also focusing on those special groups and making sure that it's that any professional development is really targeted towards the needs of those?
Great question. I'm going to give you a few different answers of what's going on. Under state law, all of our teachers are doing Science of Reading PD right now. All of our teachers have received train the trainer style training on M-Class Dibbles, and because they are one of our vendors of assessments, we're in constant communication with them, and then we use our instructional coach team as well as our interventionists at elementary to learn new and continue to develop. We have some job-embedded coaching going on where a teacher might watch another expert teacher give an assessment, or they might break down the data together to make decisions. We're working on some goal writing PD. So it's a combo of some external pieces combined with some internal experts providing that PD. We are lucky in this district to have a lot of very strong literacy educators, both in Chris's department and in mine, and we have a PD plan for our interventionists as well as our principals are providing additional support for their teachers in their building. We also, when we look at our reading data, we know that there are students coming to us still learning the English language or having additional challenges in their reading journey. So each one of those children is equally important to us. So we are spending some time really learning about language development, and our November PD time with our teachers will be focused around language acquisition and discussion, ways to support students in structured discussion in the classroom, which benefits all students and our English learners in our classrooms. So that's just a tidbit.
Great, that's what I wanted to know, what's going on in between the testing times and making sure that those special groups that needed are also able to reach these goals, because
Absolutely.
they're high goals. So good, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just remembered that I did have a question for communications. So probably Mrs. Dietrich, you might be able to answer this. When assessing for accessibility on our websites and social media, is that something that we are doing internally or someone auditing it? How does that work?
We have an integration module for our website in which it's called Audio Eye, and so we get reports on accessibility issues on the website. And then I do have a expert in the accessibility and website design field that if I can't take care of it myself, so if it's not one that I'm just not well adapted to, I then send it. His name is Gunnar, so he's a contractor of ours or a vendor that I send it to, and then he helps me. So if it's something that I just can't manage or I'm not able to do, he helps. And so we have him contracted for this school year to go in and really improve our accessibility on our website. This is not just accessibility for individuals with disabilities, such as screen readers, but also EL. And so we're going to have a huge emphasis on translation and getting things actually embedded to the website, such as we did with our handbooks. Our goal is to do that across the website. The other person who's been extremely helpful is Jackie Ebner. She's the new Gifted Services Administrative Assistant, and she's providing some additional support as well with the website so that we can really, that's like one of my high priorities in our department, is to get it in a good place.
Great, thank you. That was my second question.
Okay, I just have two questions. One is for Mr. Boney. When you talked about the non-instructional employees that we have, and then that tuition benefit, 40% utilization of that benefit, I know you said that, that's a higher turnover rate in that group, and you were doing exit interviews. I just wonder, is that tuition component something that could be, enumerated for like a better utilization of it? So is that part of why they're leaving? I'm just trying to figure out, because I would hope that would be higher for that group.
I don't know that there's necessarily that we've drawn the correlation that the tuition benefit usage and the turnover rate are necessarily connected. but it's there as something that we know that staff who are in non-instructional roles, not everybody wants to move on to do something else. But we do know there are some who definitely come here with hopes of wanting to move on to other positions. And so the idea is that those benefit dollars are there every year. They renew every year. And so why not use those, or at least educate our staff so that they know what's available to them? Because I think that sometimes the things that are available, we take it for granted because it's work that we do every day, but maybe not everybody knows that. And so we feel like there are connections that we can make for staff. I feel like we have a lot of expertise around, our various departments around, like, how do you go from, for example, being a teacher to being a principal? Like, those are things that we know, but that may not necessarily be the case for everybody. And I think in some of those non-instructional roles, instead of seeing those positions as terminal, seeing those positions as maybe a stepping stone to do other things in the district. And so that's what we're hoping to do. And Mr. Andres and I talked earlier this week that maybe, we have people that are really, really talented in their respective positions. Maybe finding out from principals, who are some people that you would love to see move from that role into a classroom position, as an example. And then working with those folks around tuition benefits, around programs that we know are really good, and just helping to give them a little bit of an oomph or a push so that they can then move on and do other things in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. And my other question was just about the meeting at Jerome on the 17th, or I'm sorry, the 21st.
Sorry.
I did it again.
My fault.
Of October. And just, I may have missed this. So the community portion of that, I just want the community to know what that looks like that evening.
Cassie, I can take it. We will start with a introduction by Mr. Cropper. He intends both for the virtual meeting tomorrow night and for the in-person meeting to remind the community of the process and how he actually does this work. And then folks will be free to go to, he said, several stations throughout the Jerome Commons and kind of in front of that performing arts area where maps will literally be on easels. They'll be displayed. And then he'll take feedback from there. He'll take all that feedback, go back, readjust, and then have maps ready for us in December. Did I miss anything, Cassie? Thank you, the survey. You talked about the survey.
Yeah, so after they do the gallery walk, that's kind of what we call that process with the maps, then we will launch, or not we, Cropper will launch a survey as well, trying to gather feedback about the maps and what people's kind of satisfaction with them were. And people have an opportunity through the start of November to provide survey feedback. I believe that closes November 3rd. And then from there, that's when Cropper will take all the survey feedback. They'll take all the qualitative feedback that they got in person that night, because they're going to have people kind of standing around listening to what people say as people walk and do the gallery walk. Take all of that data, make adjustments to the maps, share it with the internal planning team, and then that's when we'll bring them to the board and present them December 9th.
And Cropper's pointed out that it's not a done deal on the 21st. There are people who provide valuable feedback. So the maps that are provided on the 21st are where Cropper GIS is at that moment. And they take additional feedback to make changes when appropriate.
Exactly.
Okay, now I get to go to my report.
I have 3 questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. President Gillis.
I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Andres, you mentioned capturing information for the community service seal. How are you going about that? Because I'm even thinking of, like, National Honor Society has community service requirements. I was just curious, like, you didn't go further into, you just said you were looking for ways to capture more information.
First, I'm happy you asked a question because I was feeling left out. Honestly, that'll be the work that we're going to do this fall with our buildings. Yeah, our school counselors and our building principals are going to know the best ways to dig into that information and figure out how to do that. I mean, again, our kids are doing so many things. You could probably ask 10 different kids and get 10 different answers, but we'll definitely work with our high school principals on that one. Okay,
perfect. And then for the retention, You mentioned, Mr. Bioni, about the paraprofessionals and that being at 14.5%, and we do an exit survey. I was just curious if we did kind of like, I mean, I guess people aren't going to like mention they're leaving and quitting and leaving DCS, but is there like a mid-year like situation that we could try, like before you leave us for whatever reason, can we catch you before you already have both feet out the door?
We've talked about, there's something in the HR world, they call them stay interviews. So it's the idea that, for your people that are high performers, what is it that keeps you coming back to work every day? And so we feel like that could be part of this idea of looking at retention as well. And so I think that's part of a multi-pronged approach to this, is looking at not only for the people that are exiting, but the people that we want, to retain as well, that we could do stay interviews. That's not in here, but it's certainly something that we could do that as well. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Okay, fantastic. And then Dr. Marshausen, if you could just define short-term when we're talking about the SIOTA solution, unless I'm taking up your next slide, but just so we can just put a number out there. What
It
is
opens in the fall
short-term?
of '26. So short-term would be, that's the fastest we can get an addition on Dublin SIOTA
And
High
then,
School.
but we're saying short-term solution, so how long do we think that's holding us? Like before we're gonna come back and talk about,
Well, I think if we can stay on a 5-year levy cycle, I think we would need to have a potential solution for the community. We may have some bond millage rolling off when we get to 2028. We're not going to hold Mr. Kern to the exact amount. But when we look at the future and we look at kind of how we do things, because if something were passed that had broad community support in November of '28, it's 2030 before it's opened. So this has to last us from '26 at least until the 2030-31 school year. So that would be, the longer term would be to get back on the next levy cycle.
perfect. And then I'm just really quick, I know you want to move along. I just want to kind of reiterate we're like a year away from high school maps. We're focused on middle school and elementary now. And I have never been through redistricting as a board member, but I would really love to see some positivity in our community as we just sat here and listened to Journey 2030. I don't think there's a person in this administration or on this board who would say that we don't care about any kid in any of our buildings. The student experience is what I keep coming back to. And as we did multiple focus groups, the one that continues to go around in my mind is when we spoke to our high schoolers and how we're having different experiences at different high schools. And so to move 500 to 600 children over to SIOTA High School, I think is a plus for not only student experience, but also for overcrowding of the high schools. And it's disappointing to only be hours into talking about a survey that's actually for our middle schools and our elementaries, to already hear the fear and disinformation spreading, especially on social media. So if we can take an emotional step back and remember that this is one district and we work better together for a reason. And I just really hope that as we go on this journey to create a better student experience for all three of our high schools, we remember that that's the intention all the way around. So Dr. Marshausen, I will give it over to you and get off my podium.
No, you can you're going to have to say that over and over for about 22 months. So you keep going with that. I'm all there. Two things before I get into my slides. One, I want to thank Mr. Stark and Kevin Perkins and the team. Yesterday, we turned off the power at Jerome to do electric connection over to Bishop Elementary, and lo and behold, the internet didn't work. And Mr. Stark and his team, I got a call from Jeff at 9 p.m. and then a text at 11:25 p.m. that they had found it and fixed it, and we were all a little in a panic because when you don't have internet now, you don't have phones. And what does that look like? And we can't tell parents now, and how we're going to do this. But Jeff, you came through. Thank you, and to your team and everyone who is there. Very much appreciated. We're starting to get some complaints to the board members and to Dr. Schwanke and I when we look at the impacts of the responsible staffing plan. And we have a history in Dublin of just when there's a problem, we say yes. and there are people who don't like the answer no. And it's great if you're in a place that has unlimited resources, and when there's a problem, you can throw money at it. We're not there. So as we look at making decisions about staffing, there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. And sometimes those tough decisions aren't terrible. Right now, I believe you've all received a couple emails about various music programs and music groups in our high schools. There are some parents who are upset that we have 25 students in Kaufman's jazz band and we're not hiring a second music teacher to be with those 25 students in jazz band. And historically, we may have had a second music teacher there. I am extremely confident that the music staff at Kaufman can have a jazz band with one director and 25 kiddos. Some of our folks at Jerome are unhappy with how we staff Jerome's orchestra. The person who is helping Mrs. Adair in the orchestra at Jerome is a fully licensed music teacher who is very capable of being the second person who's leading Jerome's orchestra. There are some folks who, because they don't like the answer, they're now saying that we didn't communicate with them. Now, if we communicate with you and it's not the answer you like, it doesn't mean we didn't communicate with you. So we're pretty consistent in the message that we give. As we look at our music program, we've worked really hard to eliminate music teachers who had 2 travel periods. It's not really effective if you travel between schools and every time you travel you get a period to do that. It's not effective if you travel twice. So that's meant we've had to shift some staff around. This is hard, and it's going to continue to be a challenge as we look at how we grow over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but we want to be fiscally responsible and we got to stretch this budget. So thank you, board members, for your support. Thanks for sending the messages back to all of us. And please know that we will continue to be consistent and we will continue to respond. Sometimes the answer is no. And I think that's a bit of a challenge for us because it hasn't always happened that way. On the great news, we are now 8 days into a new school year with the largest enrollment ever in Dublin City Schools, and it's growing every day. I would venture to say we have more kids today than we did on the first day of school, and they just keep coming. So thanks to everybody who made that possible. It was a great start to the school year, and we're really excited about it. Part of the stuff that we do in those 3 days with teachers before school is our safety training. And Mr. Valentine and Mrs. Gillis got to hear as Megan O'Callahan and I spoke about our partnership with the city. We did threat training and bomb training with our teachers during the teacher workdays. And then a week ago, we had a SWAT threat at one of our elementary schools. It was exactly what we trained for. And the police did exactly what they said they would do in training. Our staff did exactly what they said they would do in training. And we didn't skip a beat. There have been schools who have closed with a threat because everybody didn't do their job quickly to assess that it came from an IP address outside of Ohio, and working with our police and our law enforcement partners to make sure that we did it right. So kudos to the police who came into every one of our buildings and led those tabletop exercises with our teachers. It was led by our police. And for our teachers for taking it so seriously, because what happened at Wyandotte that morning was talked about at every other school, and the teachers were saying, well, this is what we did on Tuesday. And yeah, we train for a reason. We'll have more trainings as the year goes on, but it's great that it works that way. And our secretarial staff who buzz people in, who check badges, We know there are a lot of folks who just think, I'm a mom, I should be able to come into the building, I should be able to do what I need, but we don't know who everyone is. So all of those safety checks are there for a reason, to keep our kiddos and our staff safe, and they work really well. During that first week of in-services, we had an opportunity to take a hard hat tour at Bishop Elementary. Dr. Schwanke and I had an opportunity to be at the preschool on the first day of preschool to see how all the construction's going. Mr. Stark keeps telling us we're on time and we're going to be ready for those buildings to open in August of 25, and he loves it when I give him challenges, so we keep giving him more every day. Mr. Bauer is serving Wright Elementary now, but Lucas will be ready in January to go over to Bishop and begin that process. Mr. Boney and I were talking today about how do we do the staff process and what does that look like as we go through staffing Bishop Elementary to open. So we're rolling and we're excited, and it's fun to go over and walk and see the new building and to envision what it's going to be. And there will be 800 new kiddos who go in there on the first day. And although they'll have been redistricted to go there, they'll all be excited because it's going to be a great place to be. Finally, there is a recommendation on your agenda for a contract with New K-12 Solutions as an audit of our gifted services, our EL services, and our special education services. This is the same firm that did an audit for us on our staff levels last year. And I think Mr. Kern and I would agree it'll pay for itself 100 times over with the staff services contract. This contract will pay for itself, no doubt, 10 times over. And as we look at what is our model when we serve those three specific populations as we continue to grow, this isn't about reducing staff. This is about, as we move forward, are there ways we can continue to provide the Dublin quality services in those areas a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more skillfully in terms of making sure we have the right people in the right places. And we've set as a team the goal to have 1,430 certified employees in 2028. And that's how many we had last year. So as we do this, it's about, are we being efficient and effective in the places that we are? And do we right-size our staff where that staff needs to be right-sized? Although we haven't let Chris talk a lot tonight, Mr. Andres is our point person for this work with New K-12 Solutions. He's also co-chairing with Mrs. O'Connor our behavior task force. So there are going to be a lot of times that we get to hear from Mr. Andres in the next 12 months as we work through this. So Mr. Levinson's been here before. I've had the opportunity to work with Nate in 2 different districts. And I can honestly say that in my time as the superintendent in the Hilliard City Schools, the work that Nate Levinson did is one of the reasons that 2016 levy has lasted Hilliard till 2024. So I think as we look at this here, his work is able to help us with efficiencies. And he works in 400 school districts nationwide, can bring those comparative benchmark district practices to us. And excited to dive into these 3 areas. And again, it's emotional. It's going to be challenging, hard work, but that's what we do in Dublin. So thank you all very much.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
About the, it's specifically about the gifted and talented portion of that. Right now, we don't service our high school students that are gifted in a planned out formula. So are they looking at adding that piece and that component to it? And if, I mean, that would obviously change staffing as well, if they wanted to add gifted to the high school in an
It could.
actual planned out formula.
Yeah, and as we, Chris?
We have one GIS at the high school level. You're correct in what you're describing for service, but we do have students who meet with her and work with her. It's not an ODE specific service, but I think it'll be interesting to see what suggestions and ideas they have for us for the next 5 to 10 years moving forward.
Thank you.
I have a question too. With the, and you might not have an answer to this right now, but with the review process, it mentions that there will be a parent advisory committee or an equivalent to that to look at current practices. Since we don't have like a parent advisory committee, where would we be getting parent stakeholders to participate in that process? And I know you might not know that now, but I'm just curious.
I'm excited to have my first call with them on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll make a note and put that in a future update to give you a little bit more information.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, if there are no more questions, thank you, Dr. Marshausen, for your reports. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 5B and 5C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Messick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Treasurer comments. Mr. Kern.
We got a whole lot on the agenda this evening, but no, just kidding. We just have a few items. One thing I did want to update you guys on is I know we don't like paying taxes, but it does fund majority of our school district from that standpoint, so it is important. We do have final settlements in for second half from Franklin and Delaware County, but we are waiting on Union County to settle yet. So we'll see where we're at, and you'll see that information, of course, in our financial reports, and then however that progresses, we'll see go into the November 5-year forecast update. But I do just like to let you know kind of where we stand with that, since that is our major revenue driver for operations. This evening, as far as the agenda is concerned, we do have one student activity purpose clause. It's Jerome's turn to get their class of 28 approved. And then also we have some donations in here with the explanations on what they are for. So that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. It is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 6B and 6C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Messig,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gillis.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from Department of Academics and Student Learning. I'm sure you've hit
We
it all.
are all good.
Okay, all right. Department of Operations.
We have a couple items for approval tonight. The first one is an easement for Columbia Gas, and this is basically allowing them to use our land to put down the gas pipes for Elementary 15. So it's just an easement with really no major call-outs. And the second one is, this is a, no pun intended, this has every moving part available. This is the new HVAC for Riverside. I put it in my board report with as many details as I can. We only received one public bid for this, and we're glad it came in with the budget. We think that's because, one, this isn't, it's an HVAC provider, but it's one that's going to have a lot of subcontractors underneath it, because it's almost demolishing the school to give it a real nice system. So this is over 2 summers. We have a lot of planning on this. We have a project manager on top of this. There's a lot going on here, and we're recommending Spear Mechanical for a contract of about $5 million, and we have a 15% contingency on top of that for unknowns as we do the building.
I'm going to explain something in layman's terms because you had to explain it to me. The heating and cooling units at Riverside, and correct me if I'm wrong, are like that in an old Holiday Inn.
Yes.
They're on the floor. We have to put all of the ductwork and all of the vents and air returns in the ceilings. So when you're, say, demoing Riverside, you're not talking about walls.
I told the principal, don't visit the first month because she'll panic.
But
It's gonna be.
this is, just so we all have an understanding about what has to happen, we're taking out the Holiday Inn air conditioners and putting in
Now, they will
central air.
stay. They will stay. We're not going to rip those out. They will stay because they're part of countertops. But we are ripping out the entire ceilings, piping, ductwork will go into their electronic VAV boxes, which customizes the thermostats. And then the second summer will be in the mechanical room. We'll be putting multiple chillers. There's 2 new units on the roof, which will need structural support to hold up the roof. This is a major, so it's 2 summers, but the school year in between will have heat and air. That's part of the design. So we start in earnest as soon as school lets out in May.
Just want to add something real quick, Jeff. I talked with a couple staff members over the weekend from Deer Run Elementary, and the positivity around the flooring in particular
Oh, that's great.
is very high. And obviously that building is older. It's gotten through a number of different issues, but the one thing that I was told separate conversations was the change in environment given the lightness in the floor and how it feels. So I know a lot of work went into that and some of the stuff we weren't necessarily anticipating, but obviously always good to have positive comments.
Oh, that was, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. I'm not working on that roof at all, but it does seem like an exciting adventure to see what they do over these next 2 years. All right, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 9A and 9B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. DeSilva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Human Resources.
All right, starting out tonight on the certified agenda, it's a lot slimmer than the ones for the past few, but on tonight's you'll see a single salary change along with a few recommendations to hire substitutes who provide specialized services. Again, these are positions that fall outside of those ESC positions where we have our teacher substitutes. The pupil activity contracts that are on tonight are for athletics and music primarily. The supplementals, they cover athletics, but you'll see a few that are club or administrative related. This is all beginning of the year supplementals that's pretty typical for this time of year. Moving on to our classified agenda, you'll see 5 resignations, and then there are several new hires on. There's actually 16 of them. And one of the things that we're doing right now is working to fill our open positions that we have in transportation. So that's why there's so many. The bulk of the items on tonight's HR section are really around stipends, and there's 21 of them that are on. And this is pretty normal for this time of year. Many of these are support-related services that are typical of our school year start, so content leads, curriculum work, and then work in our student support services area. This is also the time we put on stipends for mentors that work with certified staff members that hold resident educator licenses. So if there are any questions, be happy to answer them, but that concludes tonight's HR portion.
I have a quick question for Mr. Andrus. So you're getting your questions in. With the Peer Connections program, is that, it says each building, is that each building at all levels, like including high school?
Yes, I'd love to open it up quickly and just make sure, but it should be. Yes. That was, listen, if I can answer with one word, keep them going, keep them coming.
Thank you so much. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 11A through 11C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. DeSilva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Gillis?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Any future agenda items? All right. Is there?
Can I just
Yeah.
give everybody a heads up? The first October board meeting is the same day that Dr. Shatkin will be here doing the presentation. We may move our board meeting to Kaufman that day so that we can meet and have a kind of truncated agenda at that October meeting, take care of what we need to take care of, push anything to the second meeting so that we can also go in then and hear Dr. Shatkin. It is a presentation that is co-sponsored by Dublin Police, Norwich Township Fire, not Norwich, Washington Township Fire, Jerome Township, Concord Township, Ohio State. He is our district contracted psychiatrist out of Columbia University, New York, Columbia, NYU, I'm sorry. A big university in New York. He wrote the book, Born to Be Wild, and is going to talk about why our teens take youth, why some of them are risk averse, and how as parents and adults we can help avoid, and how we can help navigate that teenage journey. Am I missing anything?
No, but the only announcement we've sent out about that was an Inside DCS last night, and we already have 300 seats reserved for the event. So if you think you want to go, I suggest getting a ticket because it may sell out.
How many seats are available?
In the
Right, not
Kaufman-
available, how many can we hold?
However big the Kaufman PAC is, the Performing Arts Center.
850 to 900, is that? A little under 8?
Yeah. That's a great question for Tanya Ewert, our event specialist.
And we will reserve seats for the board, and we will have an opportunity for you to sit as a group when after we adjourn the meeting to hear Dr. Shatkin's message, if you're interested.
I appreciate you following up on that because that was a question I think I sent, was it Tanya or Cassie? Or I sent someone and then I died with that. I forgot it. So can you tell us how that night would look? Because I feel like we said it started.
That starts at 7, correct?
It felt like there was a journey before there.
At 6 o'clock, we will open the doors, and our first responders and our partners will have essentially an open house in which parents are resource fair, in which parents can walk around, they can meet the SROs, they can learn about the safety playbook and all the things that first responders provide in addition to the support we provide through the schools. So Dr. Shatkin will not take the stage until 7, so you'll have the hour during the open house in which to do your board meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And if there are no other comments or questions or items to add, is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Rigby, second by Mrs. De Silva. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.